Since it became winter, I've been doing indoors projects. That's what you got to do up north when it's too cold to do anything fun outdoors. So I've been doing routine and catch up and makeup maintenance on this car so I can hit the ground running in springtime. And one of the things that's adjacent to other work that I was also doing is to service the power steering system, because on this car, since I bought it, I never serviced the power steering system. That was a deliberate, I wouldn't say an oversight, but like a deliberate pause. My plan was to convert it to electric power steering. My economic situation was different when I made those plans. Don't need to go back into that again. Point is, I never got around to servicing the power steering system, and so now I'm doing that finally. And another thing that I'm going to be doing is something that you may be able to make use of, and that's the reason I'm making this video in the first place. As you're likely aware, there's three kind of principal parts of a power steering system in a car like this. There's the pump, which pumps, it creates the pressure that does the work. There's the rack, which is the part that actually pushes the wheels side to side, and it has all the other mechanisms inside of it for turning that hydraulic pressure along with your steering input into extra help turning the wheels. And in the process of doing that, when you're taking a fluid and you're, beating it up and like forcing it to get under pressure and stuff like that, you're generating quite a lot of heat in that fluid. And so the third part is a power steering fluid cooler. On the V6 versions of this car, that's just a loop of metal. It doesn't have any fins on it. It's just simply a bare loop of metal, and they figure the exposed surface area of that is enough to take care of the heat that's created. On these versions, they have a big finned cooler, and that leads us to what I'm going to be doing today. This thing is a filter. It's got a barb fitting at either end of it. It's got a filter element inside of it, and it's also got a magnet inside of it. It's directional, so it has a little arrow that tells you which direction the flow is supposed to go in. Next thing I got is a pair of these guys right here. And what this guy here is a pipe fitting on one side and a barb fitting on the other. And this threads into the radiator. And the reason that's possible is that this is a manual transmission car, which does not have an external transmission cooler. The radiator on this, however, and pretty much all aftermarket and replacement radiators are made to fit both manual and automatic cars, and as such, they have the built-in automatic transmission fluid cooler. So these guys here are going to thread in where the automatic transmission cooler lines would go, except instead they're going to accept power steering fluid, which means that I can get rid of that old beat-up extra radiator assembly down there in the front of the car. I've seen this in way too many internet conversations where people reach this conclusion that if there is such a thing as too hot, then any amount of hot is also too hot. I'm not quite sure I understand the logic they're following there, but a lot of people seem to think that since 350 degrees will definitely degrade oil very quickly, that means that 200 will also degrade it very quickly, and that's not how that works. It's not at all how it works. So having it run at the correct temperature to cause it to evacuate out any water that's in it and boil off any volatiles that are no longer contributing to lubrication anyways, and let those just kind of vaporize out of it, that's actually a good thing. And as for the duration of time that it can spend at 200 degrees before actually degrading and becoming something bad, that period of time is longer than the interval that you should service it at anyways. So point being, this is going to thread into the upper and lower ports on the radiator since it's an aftermarket radiator, and that's going to allow me to use the radiator's built-in wet-to-wet transmission cooler instead as a power steering cooler. And yes, it has plenty of capacity for this. There's not going to be any kind of problem. It's just going to be slightly less parts hanging off the front of the car. These things on the radiator have had little plastic plugs on them, and I've since removed those, but there hasn't been any driving since when I removed them, which means that there hasn't been any chance for dust or whatever to accumulate in there. I'm not worried about fluid getting contaminated, but if these have been open, you'll probably want to flush them before doing this because, of course, this is open to the air now. This thing here is going to have some plumber's tape on it to avoid a leak, but just for discussion's sake, I'm going to thread it in there real quickly for you. And we're just going to do it a couple turns. So now that this is in there a couple of turns, you can see that there is a bit of a problem, and that is that this just has the line go straight that way, and the line that it's supposed to plug into is way down there somewhere. So this is less than ideal. There's not actually a whole lot of room for it to go around back here and then somehow come back to that. I think that maybe if I felt like really reworking all this, that might be the right answer, to send it back that way and then loop it around. Today, though, that's not what's happening. So what's going to happen with this is that I'm going to use this funny looking hose here, which has some heat set curves built into it and is sold literally for this exact purpose. You buy this with all these different curves on it, and then you utilize whichever curves are going to make sense for your specific need. And so what I'm going to do is take this that's sticking out here, and I'm going to use this right angle curve here to just bring that straight down, and I'm going to use this coupling right here to couple it with the existing hose. And that's pretty much all that it's going to take. It's attached right here with this 8mm screw, and it's also attached over here with another 8mm screw, and then it pokes kind of through there somewhere, and that should be reasonably easy to remove. I'm certain it's going to try to drip a little bit on me. So here's the cooler. It just pulls straight out after the hoses are disconnected, and that fastener have been removed. As for the weight of it, it certainly feels around like 12 ounces. It feels about like a full beverage can. This is empty. I've held it, upside down over that to let it drain out, so it is empty. Now to what's going on under here. You've got the high pressure hose that comes out of the pump and goes into the steering rack to do work, and then after it's done doing work, it comes back out through this hose here, which is low pressure. That's clamped on here to this. I've got a hose coupling up here, which you probably can't see very well, and that goes to another piece of that wacky pre-bent hose that I got, 45 degree, and goes into the lower side of the transmission cooler. Then on the other side of it, at the very top, I've got that 90-degree piece that goes down into this filter assembly. The filter assembly then goes down into the return hose here, which then goes back up to the reservoir. There's no getting around the fact that that signature Ford power steering line is present and accounted for. I think that over time, over the next few days or few miles, as the fluid gets the air worked out of it, that should get quieted down to its base level. While I was working on this, I was also working on a couple other things. One of those is to install a set of new old stock Ford Racing Cobra lower control arms, like 2003, 2004 Cobra arms. Those are unique in a couple of ways. I probably got the very last set in existence, and that video is up there in case you want to watch it. Also, if you're interested in SN95 and New Edge Mustang stuff, I want you to check out SN95 Power Channel. I'll put a link down below to that guy. And also D Creators Creations. I'll put a link down below for him as well. They're both dudes working on pretty similar kinds of cars. They're taking their own approach to it, so it's not exactly the same way I do it, but that's great. We all get to tread different paths. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, check them out. You might be entertained and maybe learn something from them as well. Anyway, thanks for watching.